Well, let's see if we can get this rangefinder apart. First I'll just stretch out that spring and remove the pin. This screw is often very tight. That one's no exception in that regard. I'll just give that a little tap with the hammer. This will make you jump. Yeah, see if I can shock that loose. Yep. Okay, well I normally mark the position of that collar so it goes back in the same relative position. I don't think it was an eccentric, but because it's got a slot in it, it acts a little bit like an eccentric. Okay, so that's off there. Those parts will need to be cleaned. We've got the body of the rangefinder. The mask on the front has to come off because if I put that through the ultrasonic cleaner, it'll come back shiny silver. All the paint will have gone. That's very tedious having to put everything back, so we don't do that. The prism held on with two small screws. And find the appropriate screwdriver. Here it is. These two screws also give you your vertical alignment. And that little screw visible there, leave that well alone. If you get that prism loose in that holder, it is no fun at all putting it back together. Right, the eyepiece lens at the back here, which is very dusty in this case, have that off. Take the mask off, tip that lens out. That leaves just the body. This I'm going to put through the ultrasonic cleaner. I want to clean this glass here, semi-silvered mirror, and the ultrasonic cleaner will do that without damaging stuff for me. Now this surface is the front surface. That's plain glass. You can clean that with a cotton bud and some glass cleaner, no problem at all. The rear surface down in there, leave it alone. Don't touch it with anything. It's not particularly delicate on the 2A, but better to leave it alone. There's also a little tube inside the body here. That's got a little glass lens in it. You can take it out. First you've got to take out the mirror completely. Undo that screw and you can slide the whole unit out the end of the rangefinder. That's a nuisance by itself, but it's worse than that because the position of this is critical. If you get it in the wrong position afterwards, because you can slide it backwards and forwards, you'll find that you have a hell of a time getting your rangefinder correct, because as you move the position of your eye and across the finder, the relative position of your two images will shift dramatically. It's very critical, that adjustment, and the best way to deal with it is leave it alone. I clean this in the body, never have a problem with it. Okay, so before I can clean this, first of all I need to get rid of all that grease that you see visible here. You can hardly see it because the light's on it. But this surface here is dirty with old dried grease. Now that grease will come off in the soapy water and end up deposited on the glass. So I've got to get all that rubbish off there before I clean this, otherwise I end up having to do the cleaning multiple times to try and get the glass clean. The last thing I want is to be transferring more oily residue onto those glass surfaces. Okay, that's fine, that's all I need to do there. That can go in the ultrasonic cleaner. Basically this just goes into a small glass with some hot water and a couple of drops of ordinary dish detergent, and that whole lot goes into the ultrasonic cleaner surrounded by water. And usually I find about 3 minutes is enough to clean everything up. So after the 3 minutes it just comes out, rinsed under the hot tap, lots of blowing with the blower while I dry it with a hair dryer, so you only need 3 hands, and eventually it'll come back nice and sparkly. Now if you do not take great pains to blow away any water droplets as you dry it, you'll find that the droplets will dry on the glass and they'll leave coffee rings behind. Very annoying, and if you've got those you're going to have to do the whole cleaning process all over again. Right, back when that's cleaned. Okay, that's back and that's now nice and sparkly, so all that dust and the haze and rubbish that was on that glass inside and out is gone, and that piece is ready for reassembly. Of course I've just got to go through the process of cleaning the other pieces, which is nothing exciting because it just involves cleaning the glass with a cotton bud and some domestic glass cleaner, and making sure I get rid of all the old dried grease and rubbish off that arm so that's nice and clean and ready to go. Likewise the little brass bush that was through it and the retaining washers. So I'll clean that up and then we'll put this back together. Okay, well I've got a clean set of parts here now pretty much, so we can start putting things back together. I'll start with putting this mask on the front. There's a certain amount of play in the screw holes here, so make sure you get the mask on nice and square. The glass at the back, and the convex side goes inwards. Check that that's nice and clean. That looks good. The prism goes on the end, that way up. Fit the 2 small screws in place. You want that roughly parallel with the front surface there. That's where you need to start. That'll do for a start. Okay, and that leaves us to put the arm back in place. So first I need to put the brass bush back in place there. So I'll just take some molybdenum paste. Once round the centre here where the bush is going to go, a light wipe on that surface where it's going to run against the frame, and I'll put this bush back in place. Now I'd made a little, scratched a little alignment mark across there, so I'll put that back in that position. That's a good place to start. Put the arm on. Just give that a smear of molybdenum paste there. That's where the wavy wash is going to go. Now that wavy washer takes the vertical slot out of the arm. If you didn't have that there, then the arm would be tending to float upwards or downwards, which would change the vertical alignment of your image quite markedly. So if the wavy washer is dead flat for one reason or another, you may need to reform it. Right, so that's in place. I need to hook this pin back into the spring and stretch that back into place. Get that seated. There's the arm, that's returning nicely. I've got a bit of cotton stuck on that screw head. That appears good. So now I've got to peer out the window and see what the alignment's like. Not bad. My vertical alignment is out. The moving image is low, so I need to tighten the front screw slightly. A little bit more. That's about right. Now I'm looking at my horizontal alignment, and basically I'm just judging if it comes back to the infinity position when it's at its rest position. It overshoots, so I need to tighten the screw up slightly. And that's it. So my horizontal and vertical alignment are fit for this to go back in the camera body, and final adjustment is done after that. So this back into the camera body now. Before I put this back on the camera top, I'll just put a couple of drops of Lectra on here, which will stop the thing from wanting to move if the camera gets dropped. That's probably the biggest cause of rangefinder problems with cameras, is cameras having been dropped, and it just knocks things out of alignment. Let's get this seated, line up the holes, drop the screw in from above. If I'm lucky, that'll be in the hole, and I can run the screw up, and its mate the same again. Hold that rangefinder firmly back towards the back of the camera, keeping it nice and square with the camera top. Check that the arm moves freely, that appears good. Now I'll check out the window and see what the rangefinder looks like. That's pretty good, but it comes back to the infinity position long before we reach infinity on the focus scale, so the adjustment's incorrect, so I'll just slacken off that screw, rotate this screw slightly clockwise. See what I get. It looks like I just overshot. Let's go back slightly. These adjustments are all very subtle. An awful lot of toing and froing is usually required to achieve a result. That looks pretty close. My vertical alignment is just very subtly out, so I'm going to have another go at that. Moving image is very slightly high there. That appears quite good. I'm going to lock my adjustments there and go and have a more careful look and see what I think about those. That all appears very good, so I'm going to put the shutter release and so forth in place now. I'll start with those pieces. So I'll put this little stop collar in place first. I just put a touch of synthetic grease on there to hold that in place. It just slides in over the top. This spring is going to go here over the pin. Put a wipe of molybdenum paste down the centre. And in the body, a wipe there and a wipe there. I should be able to fit this into position. Got it rotated around in the wrong direction, that's helpful. That's better. So that's sitting correctly now. The shutter release button goes on the top of that. Then this little collar goes on top of the shutter release button. I'll just swing my film advance around 90 degrees, unscrew that screw and take the film advance lever off. This return spring for the film release button can go on there. And there's the button. One last blowout to get rid of any loose dust. Make sure the shutter release is facing the front. Get the top over gently without depressing the film release button. One screw at each end of the top cover. Put the film advance lever back in place. We had that sitting out at 90 degrees. Just rotating that clockwise till I feel the ratchet drop in. Check that that moves. That's all good. What about the rewind knob? Let's deal with that. So take some synthetic grease, give the wavy washer a wipe with that, put it over that piece, put the main body over the top, take this screw, screw that in, do that up tight. That's our film reminder dial done. The camera body, right, so that little piece goes on top, that's collar. That's all working nicely. It should be a two-stage action. That moves nicely. So there's the camera body, ready to have the shutter refitted. Of course, I haven't serviced the shutter yet, so we'll put this to one side and drag the shutter and lens assembly in, which is here. Let's see what we've got. Well, the lens looks a bit hazy, not uncommon of course. So the retaining ring, our shims, we've got a paper shim there and a metal shim by the looks of it. The rear group is just finger tight, or should be. The front group should be finger tight. Probably should have been a bit more finger tight than that. And here's our shutter. We'll take the trim ring out. That just fills up a space. It's a dress ring. It doesn't hold anything forward. It's not required. Doesn't make any difference to the focus. It just covers up that stuff there. It sits loosely in that space. Okay, there's our shutter. We can take the outside case off this. And we'll start by removing these two screws. Pull that case gently back. I've got to disconnect the flash contact yet. Take that piece out. That's the piece that gives us our click stops for the aperture settings. Our flash contact, the screw is there. It clamps the flash contact in place. Back that up slightly. Pull the wire out. Okay, so there's our case. There's the curved rack. It couples to the gear on the front of the camera and cocks the shutter. There's a tiny plastic insulator in here, and I'd like to get that out before I lose it. So I'll just remove that screw. And see if I can encourage that plastic insulator out. I assume it's present. Can't say I'm particularly seeing it there. Okay, we'll see if we can recover that later, assuming it was there to start off with. This front cover here is bayoneted onto the shutter. This is the lock. I've got to rotate that lock out of the way, and then I can unbayonet the front. Right, with the correct screwdriver, rotate that lock till the flat side comes round to the centre, which disengages the lock. Rotate this piece anti-clockwise slightly to line up the lugs on the bayonet, and this should lift off. Here we go. This is the shutter speed settings cam plate. Have that off. Unhook this spring from the catch. Unhook this coil spring here from that post. It allows me to lift out this piece, which is called the main lever. You can lift out the shutter release. This is the B lever. It's got a return spring at the top here, and we want that off. Without losing the spring, I'll slacken that off slightly, unhook the spring, lift out that lever, that screw complete with the spring. Is it in focus? No, it's not in focus. Why is it not in focus? Come on camera, hurry up. Right, off with the B lever. This is the settings lever for our flash sync speed. It's a shoulder screw. Lift that out. Here's our lever. It didn't go far. It's a plain screw at this end. And see if I can lift this cover off. Okay, I'll unhook this spring. This is two pieces. They're held together with a little spring, those pieces. They're awkward to get back together. You don't need to worry about that if it comes off together. Right, let's have those pallets out. If flash lever here, want that out, single screw at this point. Take out the 500th of a second speed spring. Take out this cam arrangement.